Chinese troops on the territory of Ukraine. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has imposed record tariffs against China. Elon Musk has effectively challenged Donald Trump regarding the tariffs. How will the tariff war and the situation on the front end? About this and more in my traditional briefing for you. Greetings, friends, on my channel. I am Alexander Musienko. And traditionally, we talk about the events that I consider relevant, important, and worthy of your esteemed attention. So as it is known, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, reported that Chinese citizens were discovered in the Donetsk region and taken captive. Investigative actions are currently underway to determine how they ended up there, how they actually became part of the Russian army, because there is information that there could have been significantly more. Moreover, they must have senior groups, a commander, because this involves language, because there is a language barrier, and it also involves appropriate command support. So, well, let's say there is something to think about and discuss. So, now, in fact, this story is gaining momentum because it is necessary to find out how and whether this is the official position of China. That is why the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine summoned the temporary chargé d'affaires of China in Ukraine, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs noted, specifically Andriy Sybiha, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we strongly condemn the involvement of Russian citizens of China and its aggressive war against Ukraine, as well as their participation in combat actions against Ukrainian forces. Well, then, actually, this is indeed a serious topic, and it will gain momentum. China, predictably, took a pause. They will never respond very quickly, and now we need to find out what might have happened. In my opinion, there are three versions of events regarding how Chinese troops could have ended up in Ukraine. Well, the first version is that this is the position of the Chinese government, and they are sending some of their special units to gain experience in modern warfare. Of course, they send special units not directly, they won't publicize it, but send them under the cover of Russian military and small groups. They really might participate in combat operations. The second version is that China might be aware that certain citizens of China, without the approval of the central government, the Communist Party of China, its central executive bodies, could have participated in combat operations and traveled to fight due to certain motivations, financial, ideological, I don't know which, possibly financial, because China is a country of contrasts, as there are both very wealthy examples of cities and not so much in villages. Specifically, by the way, the development of the village. And the current leader of China, Xi Jinping, pays attention to infrastructure there. So perhaps China was simply turning a blind eye to this and thought that in this way they could indirectly help Putin, since it is evident that Russia cannot achieve results on the battlefield with its own forces. And they need to involve North Korean troops, weapons from North Korea, and they desperately need China's support, financially and economically. Political support is needed, as well as direct military support. Therefore, China did not pay attention to this, thinking, well, let the Kremlin hold on a little longer. And the third version is that the Chinese government might not have known about this at all. And these Chinese citizens appeared on their own. Well, how so? Perhaps they didn't even come from China, but from Russia or third countries and just decided to make some money. This is also possible. And such a factor could also be at play. It is clear that Russia has long since begun the internationalization of this conflict. They are involving citizens from other countries because they lack their own resources to achieve their goals. Ukraine does not and will not allow Russia to triumph and achieve victory. This is already obvious. It is very good that the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, raised this issue and publicly announced which of these versions is the most likely. It seems to me that the second and third options I mentioned, about either China turning a blind eye, you know about this, and now the channel, for supplying manpower to Russia will be cut off, or these are indeed just Chinese citizens who decided to go to work. Meanwhile, Russia does not stop carrying out its terror. They struck last night in the Dnipropetrovsk region, in Dnipro, in Kharkiv, essentially just strikes in residential areas, in the courtyards of apartment buildings. There is destruction, there are injured, unfortunately. So we see that the campaign of terror does not stop. Despite this, of course, we would like our partners from the United States to pay attention to what the Kremlin is doing, how it is essentially involving military personnel from China, and that this is the internationalization of the conflict. The US State Department has already responded to this. The reaction is interesting. On one hand, the State Department spokesperson noted absolutely correct things and stated the facts that China is a sponsor of the war, that China is helping Russia, and that China is essentially helping Russia to carry out this aggression and support it against Ukraine. On the other hand, as the State Department spokesperson noted, what else is this? She essentially quoted US President Donald Trump and mentioned that the alliance between China and Russia needs to be broken. So isn't this a reference to the position they would like to implement? Certain political circles in the US, including representatives of the US President's administration, are specifically talking about breaking this alliance. How? Well, to bring Russia back to the side of the US and jointly contain China. In this way, because right now is a period of active demonization of China, active demonization of Beijing. We see that Jay Divins, the vice president of the US, called the Chinese, he called them peasants. It's like, like poor peasants, if translated, exactly meaning a country of poor peasants. Well, I wouldn't say that about China after all. China is not just a country of peasants. China is a developing country. China is a country, certain progress. And China is a country that challenges the United States of America. Well, in addition to everything, US President Donald Trump increased tariffs. And in total, they now amount to about 104% on Chinese products. China is preparing a response, countermeasures, and notes that already the American economy itself may be directly affected by this. That is, these are indeed the realities that may occur. Well, that is, we can say that the tariff war is in full swing. So the question here is, despite everything, there is information that the next round of meetings is being prepared for April 10th, literally this Thursday of the week. A meeting is to take place between representatives of the American and Russian delegations in Istanbul, that is, the continuation of negotiations on the restoration of relations and cooperation between Russia and the USA. It is not excluded that consultations between the American and Ukrainian delegations will take place in the near future, meaning the negotiation process is ongoing and will continue. This is the consistent position of the United States. We must understand. It may turn out that indeed, given that the attention of the US president is increasingly shifting towards China, Iran, Yemen, it has somewhat moved away from the Houthis. Now it's Panama, the Panama Canal, from where the US Secretary of Defense, Hexit, promised to expel China, as they note, and Chinese investments. Hexit flew there. His participation in the Ramstein format is not yet confirmed. April 11th, Friday. Most likely this will be the first Ramstein meeting to take place without high-level representation from the US. The US is shifting its focus to China. And it seems to me that for the US, China, is such a convenient adversary. China does not pose a military challenge to the US. China does not threaten the use of nuclear weapons. All of this is threatened by Russia. Russia is conducting a full-scale war in Europe. Russia is engaging in aggression. Then Russia needs to be addressed. And for some reason, we see that now everything is being shifted. Everyone is backing down. Accusations from the US against China and Russia. And where is Russia on this list? And why isn't there 100% against Russia? Tariffs, and especially against oil, but where are the 500% duties that were talked about in the Senate? They are not there. As of today, China is a likely opponent, a convenient opponent. It does not engage in wars. Let's analyze China's history. China has not acted as an aggressor in wars. Historically, China has defended itself. The only time China did it was the operation in Vietnam, where they stayed for 67 days. In Vietnam, they declared themselves victors and withdrew, and no one in the global community, it seems, really understood anything. In most other cases, China has defended itself. Why not reason with Kim Jong-un, who constantly launches missiles, the leader of North Korea? And where is the reaction to this? Where is the reaction to the deployment of troops? Where is the reaction to the cooperation? Why don't the United States talk about North Korea? They are firing towards US allies, towards Japan, towards Guam, the American base in the Pacific Ocean. Is it because it's too troublesome? Don't we want to? That's where the question arises. The focus is now shifting to China. These are the realities we need to understand. At the same time, we see that there is support from European partners, and very successful. A visit took place by the Belgian delegation, led by the Prime Minister of this country, who speaks very warmly about Ukraine. And Belgium will allocate 1 billion euros annually to aid Ukraine in the defense and security sector. And of course, we are grateful to our Belgian partners, Europeans, who, despite everything, continue to support Ukraine and declare their support. And in the future, this is very important for us, against the backdrop of the unfolding tariff confrontation in the world. And in the USA, internal issues around tariffs and internal crisis contradictions are deepening. For example, Elon Musk, a billionaire, called an advisor, an assistant to Donald Trump, the president of the USA, and essentially the author, the head of trade production policy, precisely one of those people who are the ideologists of implementing these draconian tariffs against the rest of the world. So Elon Musk called Navarro an idiot and dumber than a bag of bricks because of his statement that Tesla only assembles cars in the USA rather than fully developing them. This is what Navarro noted, that it is necessary for all car components to be produced exclusively, i.e. in America. We all in the White House understand, and the American people understand, that Elon is a car manufacturer. But he is not a car manufacturer, he is a car assembler. In many cases, if you visit his Texas factory, a significant portion of the engines he receives comes from Japan and China. The electronics come from Taiwan. So what do we want? And the difference between us and Elon is that we want the cars to be made Vacroni, tires. We want the transmissions to be manufactured in Indianapolis and so on and so forth. To which Musk said that it's impossible and called Navarro an idiot. Well, essentially, it's just bickering. We see disputes within the Trump team. Well, we understand perfectly that, let's say, the differences between Musk and Trump were somewhat inevitable. Let's see further, because if they do everything to set Musk against Trump, then I think Musk will already start considering an alternative, thinking about who could become the next president and whom to support. Possibly not even a Republican, but a Democrat. That is, this cannot be ruled out either. Meanwhile, the United States of America is leaving the military logistical hub in the city of Jasionka. This is in the Rzeszów area. This was stated by the Polish Minister of Defense, Władysław Kosiniak-Kamysz. He stated that the reduction of the American presence in Rzeszów does not mean the US is leaving Poland to weaken Allied support. The US is indeed not leaving Poland. They are staying, but they are leaving Rzeszów and handing it over to NATO management. There will be military missions from the UK, Norway, and Poland. And indeed, they will be monitoring the continued supply of aid to Ukraine. However, the very fact that the US is withdrawing for the first time since the start of the full-scale Russian aggression suggests that this might be a gradual preparation for reducing and scaling back aid to Ukraine. This corresponds with the fact that under the Hexit, the US Secretary of Defense might not visit, Ramstein. And we see such things that are happening, although earlier I want to remind you, there was a headquarters in Wiesbaden and that it is still operating in Germany, but it might cease to operate there. So this might also be reduced. After all, as is known, the former commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, now the ambassador of Ukraine to the United Kingdom, Valery Zaluzhny, confirmed that indeed this mission was located in Wiesbaden, that it operated jointly with Ukraine, and that this headquarters effectively helped Ukraine plan and conduct operations. As Valery Zaluzhny noted direct speech, the idea of the partnership was that close cooperation between America and Ukraine would compensate for Russia's enormous advantages in manpower and weaponry. To guide the Ukrainians during the deployment of their increasingly sophisticated arsenal, the Americans created an operation called Task Force Dragon. Let's see what fate awaits this operation in the future. But the US might wind down its mission, and this one. For now, it's not confirmed, but discussions are ongoing. And General Cavoli, the commander of NATO forces in Europe, an American general, has categorically opposed the US leaving Europe and reducing its military presence. But it might happen. We'll see how it goes. But despite everything, the struggle continues. We are strong, we are united, and we are moving forward. Take care of yourselves. Glory to Ukraine.